She showed kindness to a homeless man, not knowing he was the CEO disguised to test humanity's heart. The grand boardroom of Thorne Industries hummed with a tension thick enough to be cut with a diamond blade. Sunlight, usually a beacon of hope, seemed to cast long, ominous shadows across the polished mahogany table and the faces of the assembled executives. Lysander Thorne, a man whose name was synonymous with innovation and immense wealth, stood at the head of the table, his posture ramrod straight, his gaze piercing. His silver hair, meticulously combed, glinted under the chandeliers, a stark contrast to the disheveled appearance he had recently adopted in his private moments. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his hand as he gripped the edge of the table, not from nervousness, but from the immense weight of the revelation he was about to unleash. He scanned the faces before him, each one a carefully constructed mask of ambition and self-interest, and a bitter understanding settled deep within him. The game, ladies and gentlemen, Lysander's voice resonated, calm yet imbued with an unsettling finality, is over. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, a prophecy they were utterly unprepared to comprehend. A ripple of nervous murmurs spread through the room, quickly suppressed by a collective need for decorum. Cressida Vance, his chief operating officer, a woman whose every tailored suit screamed authority and ambition, exchanged a quick, bewildered glance with Ignis Thorne, Lysander's nephew. Her brow furrowed slightly, a rare crack in her composed facade. She had anticipated a new product launch, perhaps a philanthropic announcement, certainly not this cryptic declaration. Ignis, perpetually clad in designer casual wear that belied his mid-level management position, adjusted his expensive watch, a smirk playing on his lips, a habitual gesture of feigned boredom that concealed his relentless calculations. Neither of them truly grasped the gravity of the moment. They saw merely an eccentric old man, perhaps on the verge of another one of his dramatic pronouncements about corporate responsibility or some new, obscure tech venture that would divert funds from their carefully cultivated profit margins. They had long grown accustomed to dismissing Lysander's more philosophical ramblings as the idle musings of a man with too much time and too much money, a man who, in their eyes, had lost his edge. Lysander, with all due respect, Cressida interjected, her voice smooth as silk, yet laced with a subtle impatience that she believed was perfectly masked, we have an acquisition proposal to review. The board expects our recommendation by close of business. She gestured towards a thick dossier before her, its pages filled with projections of exponential growth, as if to underscore the urgency of real business. Her eyes, shrewd and calculating, flickered over Lysander, searching for any sign of weakness or concession, a tell that would confirm his declining mental acuity. She had always prided herself on her ability to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of power, often at the expense of others, and she believed she had Lysander Thorne, her reclusive boss, entirely figured out. He was a visionary, yes, but also predictable in his aloofness, a man whose abstract ideals were easily circumvented by concrete financial realities. She inwardly scoffed at his dramatic flair. Ignis snickered, a low, dismissive sound that carried just enough to be heard. "Uncle Lysander, are we playing charades now? If this is about your latest philanthropic whim, perhaps it can wait. My golf tee time is rather pressing." He winked at a junior executive across the table, a young man named Marcus, who forced a strained smile, caught between loyalty and fear. Ignis always felt entitled, as if his mere presence in the family tree granted him an unassailable position, a birthright to the Thorne Empire. He saw Lysander's increasing detachment from day-to-day operations as an open invitation to solidify his own perceived inheritance, to subtly undermine the old man's authority. The notion that anything Lysander said could genuinely impact his golden future was utterly alien to him. He was already mentally spending his next quarterly bonus. Lysander's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a smile devoid of humor, laced instead with a profound and chilling irony. He scanned their faces, the masked impatience, the thinly veiled contempt, the utter lack of comprehension. They believed they were at the pinnacle of their careers, untouchable, poised to inherit an empire built on the very principles they so casually disregarded. They were about to learn, in the most brutal way imaginable, that the empire was not theirs to claim, and that the game had indeed concluded, with a score they had never anticipated. The truth, like a coiled viper, was poised to strike, and when it did, it would leave an indelible mark on their meticulously crafted lives. A deep breath filled Lysander's lungs, a quiet resolve settling within him. The time for observation was over. The time for action had begun. Lysander Thorne's journey to the pinnacle of the tech world was not one of inherited privilege or serendipitous luck. It was forged in the crucible of relentless ambition and a brilliant, almost obsessive, intellect. He had grown up with nothing, a childhood marked by scarcity and the gnawing hunger for a better life. He remembered the biting cold of winter mornings, the thin threadbare blanket that offered little comfort against the concrete floor of the small, one-room apartment he shared with his struggling mother. He recalled the humiliation of patched clothes and the dull ache in his stomach that was a constant companion. Yet, amidst the hardship, there were flickers of light: the elderly librarian who let him read for hours past closing, the kindly baker who occasionally slipped him a day-old pastry, the gruff but fair mentor who taught him the rudiments of coding in a dusty community center. These small acts of unsolicited kindness had instilled in him a deep appreciation for the value of hard work, integrity, and the simple kindness of strangers who occasionally offered a helping hand. He built Thorne Industries from a garage startup, fueled by an unwavering belief that technology could uplift humanity, connect people, and solve some of the world's most pressing problems. For decades, he poured his lifeblood into his company, watching it blossom into a global titan, a testament to his vision. He had often told his early employees, a tight-knit group united by passion, that their purpose was to innovate, yes, but also to elevate, to make the world a slightly better place with every line of code, every new device. Yet, with each rung he climbed on the ladder of success, a creeping disillusionment began to set in. The higher he ascended, the more he witnessed the corrosive effects of immense wealth and power on those around him. His early ideals, once so vibrant, began to fray at the edges. He started to see avarice lurking behind every polished smile, self-interest dictating every strategic decision, and a chilling indifference towards anyone deemed unsuccessful or irrelevant. His inner circle, once a trusted cadre of loyal colleagues who shared his early dreams, gradually transformed into a viper's nest of backstabbing sycophants and cunning manipulators, each vying for a larger slice of the ever-growing pie. The air in the executive suites, once crackling with creative energy, now felt heavy with unspoken resentments and thinly veiled contempt. Cressida Vance was a prime example. Hired for her undeniable brilliance and ruthless efficiency, she quickly rose through the ranks. Lysander had initially admired her drive, mistaking it for dedication, for a sheer force of will directed towards the company's success. But over time, he observed her methods, the cold dismissal of long-serving employees deemed redundant for a marginal profit gain, employees who had dedicated decades of their lives to Thorne Industries. He witnessed the aggressive corporate takeovers that trampled smaller innovators, absorbing their intellectual property while leaving their founders destitute. He heard the casual disdain she displayed for anyone outside her immediate, wealthy orbit, how she spoke of the masses as a uniform, undifferentiated entity to be exploited for market share. He saw her charming demeanor evaporate the moment she perceived someone as beneath her or no longer useful. She was a master of the corporate game, but her moves were always dictated by the relentless pursuit of power and personal enrichment, never by genuine empathy or a moral compass. He remembered a particular incident where she publicly humiliated a junior assistant, a timid young man fresh out of college, for a minor clerical error that cost the company a few $100s. She reduced him to tears in front of a dozen colleagues, simply to assert her dominance and send a chilling message. It was a small moment, perhaps, a seemingly insignificant tremor in the vast machinery of Thorn Industries, but it gnawed at Lysander. It chipped away at his belief in the inherent goodness of people. Then there was Ignis Thorn, his own flesh and blood, or so he was often reminded by distant relatives seeking favors. Ignis was the son of Lysander's estranged brother, a man who had squandered his own opportunities and died leaving a trail of debt. Lysander, driven by a familial obligation he increasingly questioned, had offered Ignis a position within Thorn Industries, hoping to instill in him a sense of purpose and responsibility. Instead of gratitude, Ignis displayed an astonishing sense of entitlement, as if Thorn Industries was a personal piggy bank waiting to be cracked open. He saw his role not as an opportunity to learn and contribute, but as a temporary holding pattern before his inevitable inheritance, a mere formality before his rightful ascension to boundless wealth. He flaunted his wealth, made extravagant purchases of luxury cars and watches, and openly ridiculed those who weren't as fortunate, often within earshot of their humble workspaces. Lysander often overheard Ignis making disparaging remarks about the company's janitorial staff or security guards, referring to them as the invisible people or necessary nuisances, as if their labor was a mere abstraction. Once, Lysander had subtly suggested Ignis spend some time volunteering, perhaps at a soup kitchen or a community center, hoping to spark a flicker of empathy. Ignis had laughed, genuinely amused, and retorted, "Uncle, my time is far too valuable for such sentimental nonsense. Besides, those people chose their lot in life. It's not my problem to fix." This dismissive attitude, this inherent belief in a rigid social hierarchy where the wealthy stood supreme and the poor were simply an unfortunate backdrop, truly stung Lysander. It was a betrayal of everything he had worked for, a stark reflection of the very mindset he had built his company to escape. The turning point came after a particularly grueling board meeting. Lysander had proposed a significant investment in a new, experimental green energy initiative. This project, born from years of research by a small, dedicated team, held immense potential for long-term global impact, promising to revolutionize sustainable power. Its immediate financial returns, however, were uncertain, requiring a leap of faith and a long-term vision. Cressida had vehemently opposed it, her arguments precise and chillingly logical, focusing solely on short-term gains and increased shareholder dividends. She spoke of fiduciary duty and market expectations, her words devoid of any consideration for the planet or future generations. Ignis, predictably, had echoed her sentiments, more concerned with the impact on his year-end bonus and the potential for a new yacht. "Why waste money on charity, uncle, when we could be acquiring a rival and boosting our stock price?" he had asked, a sneer on his face. The discussion devolved into a cynical debate about market share, profit margins, and quarterly reports, completely devoid of any consideration for the environmental or social good. As Lysander left the boardroom that day, the grand, polished table feeling like a tombstone to his ideals, he felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. He had built this empire, brick by agonizing brick, yet it seemed to have become a beast he no longer recognized, controlled by the very greed he had always hoped to transcend. The vast wealth he had accumulated felt like a golden cage, trapping him with the very people who embodied everything he now abhorred. He looked out from his penthouse office, the city lights twinkling like a vast, indifferent galaxy, a shimmering testament to human ambition. He had everything money could buy, yet he felt profoundly poor in spirit, hollowed out by the moral compromises he had witnessed and, by his inaction, allowed. He yearned for genuine connection, for unadulterated kindness, for a flicker of the humanity he once believed was inherent in all people, even in the cutthroat world of business. The thought began to crystallize: if he couldn't find it in the gilded cages of his own making, perhaps he needed to step outside, to shed the trappings of his identity and see the world through different eyes. He needed to become invisible, to truly test the fabric of human compassion, to see if the world beyond his penthouse window was truly as cold and calculating as his boardroom. The plan was meticulously conceived, worthy of the brilliant mind that had built a tech empire. Lysander spent weeks researching the art of disguise, consulting clandestinely with special effects artists and method actors under the guise of an artistic project. He studied the gaits of the elderly, the postures of those burdened by poverty, the subtle mannerisms that convey vulnerability and fatigue. He acquired high-grade prosthetics that could alter his bone structure, wigs that thinned and grayed his hair, and learned to apply makeup that would age him decades, transforming his sharp features into the weathered, wrinkled face of a man who had seen too many hard winters. He acquired worn-out clothing from charity shops, chosen specifically for its nondescript appearance and the faint, musty smell of neglect it carried. He practiced his new persona in secret, in a rented, anonymous apartment across town, perfecting the slight tremor in his hands, the weary shuffle of his feet, the hollowed-out look in his eyes, the almost imperceptible cough that would convey fragility. He adopted the name Arthur, a common, unassuming moniker, designed to blend into the background, to invite no curiosity. His objective was twofold: first, to observe the true nature of the people he interacted with daily, particularly Cressida and Ignis, from a perspective of absolute anonymity. He wanted to see if their outward professionalism and civility extended beyond the boundaries of wealth and status, if their compassion was conditional. Second, and perhaps more importantly, he longed to find a single spark of genuine human decency, a selfless act of kindness untainted by ulterior motives, a beacon in the moral darkness he perceived. He wanted to know if, beneath the veneer of materialism and self-interest, the human heart still beat with compassion, if the simple kindnesses he remembered from his childhood still existed. This test, he knew, would determine not only the future of Thorn Industries but also the very trajectory of his own legacy, his final act as the architect of his empire. He would leave his opulent life behind for a time, trading his executive suite for the cold streets, his designer suits for threadbare rags, all in pursuit of a truth he desperately needed to find. The transformation was absolute. Lysander Thorn, the formidable CEO, vanished, replaced by Arthur, a frail, elderly man whose clothes hung loosely on his gaunt frame, whose eyes held a distant, weary gaze, and whose hands trembled slightly, as if perpetually chilled. He smelled faintly of stale air and neglect, a calculated detail to deter close interaction, to ensure his invisibility. He chose specific locations for his observations: park benches near Thorn Industries headquarters where executives often took their lunch, bus stops frequented by his employees, the bustling sidewalks where his executives often took their lunch breaks. He sought not pity, but proximity, a chance to be a silent, unassuming witness to their true selves, unburdened by their knowledge of his identity. The first few days were a shock to his system. The constant hum of the city felt louder, harsher. The cold, a persistent companion, seeped into his bones in a way his heated mansion had long erased from his memory. Hunger was a dull, gnawing ache he hadn't experienced since childhood. He learned to position himself to observe without being noticed, a phantom in the periphery. Most people simply didn't see him, their eyes glided over him as if he were part of the urban landscape, an inconvenient fixture. He became acutely aware of the hurried footsteps, the averted gazes, the unspoken judgment. His first significant encounter with the antagonists came on a crisp autumn morning. Arthur was huddled on a bench just outside the main entrance of Thorn Industries, ostensibly seeking warmth from a sliver of sun that struggled to penetrate the towering glass facades. A gleaming, high-end car, a luxury model he recognized as Cressida's, pulled up silently to the curb, its tinted windows gleaming. Cressida Vance emerged, impeccably dressed in a sharp navy suit, her designer handbag clutched firmly. She was engaged in an animated phone conversation, her voice a sharp, clipped melody that carried even over the city noise. The quarterly reports are dismal, Mark. Utterly dismal. We need to streamline. Cut fat. And I mean fat. Her eyes, sharp and dismissive, swept over Arthur for a fleeting second, registering him only as an unsightly blight on her perfect morning, a minor inconvenience that disturbed her carefully curated aesthetic. She wrinkled her nose almost imperceptibly, as if catching a faint, unpleasant scent, and quickened her pace, her conversation continuing, "I'm telling you, the optics of supporting these unproductive elements are simply not good for our brand. We need to project strength, efficiency, ruthlessness if necessary." Lysander, or rather Arthur, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. She spoke of human beings as unproductive elements, as fat to be cut, without a flicker of remorse or recognition of their inherent worth, without even acknowledging their existence as individuals. He observed her enter the building, her heels clicking a rhythmic, confident beat, leaving behind a faint trail of expensive perfume that quickly dissipated into the urban air, like a promise of something fleeting and insubstantial. The irony was almost unbearable. She was dismissing the very man who had built the empire she now sought to control, speaking of optics and brand while trampling on the human dignity she couldn't even perceive. Days later, Arthur found a spot near a popular cafe where many Thorn employees grabbed their lunch, a place buzzing with the casual chatter of power and privilege. He was leaning against a lamppost, trying to appear inconspicuous, his stomach rumbling faintly. Ignis Thorn swaggered out, 2 coffees in hand, accompanied by Marcus, the junior manager from the boardroom, who was clearly trying to impress him. Ignis, loud and boisterous, was complaining. "Can you believe the audacity? Some vagrant actually tried to sleep in the alcove near the north entrance last night. Security had to physically remove him. It's an absolute disgrace. Don't these people understand private property? And the smell, honestly." He gestured vaguely in Arthur's direction, though his eyes never truly focused on him, seeing only a generic representation of everything he disdained, a convenient object for his complaints. "They just want handouts, you know. No ambition, no drive. Pathetic. Honestly, Uncle Lysander is too soft. He talks about corporate social responsibility, when what we need is a stronger hand, better security to keep these types away from our pristine image. This company is about profit, not charity." The junior manager nodded enthusiastically, eager to agree, perhaps hoping for a promotion. Arthur felt a surge of cold fury mixed with profound disappointment. This was his nephew, the one he had tried to guide, the one he had hoped might one day embody some of his own early ideals. Instead, he was a callous echo of the very materialism Lysander despised, a louder, more vulgar version of Cressida's indifference. Ignis even went as far as to casually toss the dregs of his coffee cup onto the pavement near Arthur's feet as he continued walking, a small, thoughtless act of disrespect that spoke volumes about his contempt for anyone he deemed lesser. The cruelty, however, was not limited to casual dismissal. One particularly cold afternoon, the wind cutting through Arthur's threadbare coat, he sought shelter in a small, semi-covered area near the loading dock of Thorn Industries, trying to escape the biting wind. He was shivering, his worn coat offering little protection against the relentless chill that seemed to amplify his gnawing hunger. Suddenly, a security guard, a burly man named Dave, acting on Cressida's explicit instructions, as Arthur later overheard a junior guard relaying, approached him. "You need to move along, old man. This is private property. Ms. Vance doesn't like undesirables loitering around the premises. Ruins the image." The guard's tone was brusque, lacking any shred of compassion, his face a mask of official indifference. Arthur, playing his part, shuffled slowly, feigning a slowness that exasperated the guard. As he moved, Cressida herself emerged from the building, on her way to her car, her gaze sweeping over the scene. She paused, her eyes falling upon Arthur. "Still here?" she said, her voice dripping with thinly veiled disgust, as if he were an persistent insect. "Honestly, this is precisely why we need a more aggressive security policy. Some people just don't understand boundaries." She didn't raise her voice, but the weight of her words, the absolute conviction that he was merely a nuisance, a stain on her perfect corporate landscape, was crushing. She made a pointed show of wiping her hands with a sanitizer wipe after the interaction, meticulously rubbing her palms together, as if his mere presence was contaminating, a source of disease. Lysander observed her retreating figure, her back ramrod straight, a woman utterly devoid of humanity, blinded by her own self-importance and ambition. The wealth he had created had seemingly bred a monstrous indifference in those closest to him. His heart ached with the realization that his own empire had become a breeding ground for such callousness. The encounters with Cressida and Ignis confirmed his darkest suspicions. They saw only what they wanted to see: power, status, wealth. Those without it were invisible, contemptible, an inconvenience to be swept aside. He had spent weeks wandering, observing, experiencing the harsh reality of invisibility, the crushing weight of being ignored. He had seen countless faces, some hurried, some bored, some vaguely annoyed, but few that truly saw him. He had been brushed aside, stepped over, and cursed at by strangers. Hope for humanity had begun to wane, a dimming flicker in the face of pervasive indifference. But then, a flicker of light emerged from the most unexpected corner. It happened during a lunch hour, just as the drizzle began to fall, turning the autumn air to a damp chill. Arthur was sitting on a park bench, the cold seeping into his bones, his stomach rumbling with a dull ache that had become a familiar companion. He watched the employees stream out of Thorn Industries, heading to various restaurants or parks. Most averted their gaze, hurried past, or simply didn't see him at all, lost in their own worlds of appointments and anxieties. Then, he saw her. Ilara. She was a young woman, perhaps in her mid-20s, dressed in the modest, practical uniform of a Thorn Industries janitor, slightly faded but meticulously clean. Her movements were purposeful, efficient, but there was a quiet grace about her, even as she carried a worn, somewhat patched lunch bag. She had bright, kind eyes that seemed to truly see her surroundings, taking in the small details others overlooked. Ilara hesitated as she passed Arthur. She looked at him, not with pity, but with a genuine concern that warmed him more than any blanket could. She noticed the slight tremble in his hands, the way he clutched his threadbare coat around him as if trying to squeeze warmth from the very fabric. He saw her glance down at her own lunch bag, a momentary debate playing across her features, a silent deliberation that spoke volumes. He knew, from his clandestine observations, that Ilara often ate her simple lunch alone, carefully saving every penny. He had learned that she worked 2 jobs, struggling tirelessly to send money back to her ailing mother in a distant town, a mother whose medical bills were a constant, crushing burden. Her own life was far from easy, marked by quiet struggles he could scarcely imagine, yet she always carried herself with a quiet dignity. Finally, she made her decision. With a soft sigh that seemed to embody a deep well of empathy, she approached him cautiously, a gentle smile on her face. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her voice soft but clear, carrying a surprising strength. "You look a little cold. And hungry." She knelt slightly, so she was at eye level, not towering over him, a gesture of respect that Lysander had rarely received even from his closest associates. "I brought too much lunch today. Would you like some? It's just a simple sandwich and some fruit, but it's warm." She extended a neatly wrapped sandwich and a crisp apple, her hand steady, her eyes unwavering, filled with a pure, unadulterated kindness. There was no condescension, no pity, only a simple, honest desire to share what little she had, to alleviate another's suffering. Arthur, maintaining his persona, nodded slowly, his voice a gravelly whisper, rough from disuse and feigned weakness. "Thank you, miss. That's very kind of you." He took the sandwich, his fingers brushing hers. Her touch was warm, human, a stark contrast to the cold indifference he had become accustomed to. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the food, but for the simple act of being seen, of being acknowledged as a person. Elara smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "Of course. Everyone deserves a warm meal." She didn't linger, didn't demand conversation or explanations. She simply placed the food beside him, offered another small, reassuring smile that felt like a blessing, and quietly moved to another bench to eat her own, now smaller, lunch, her own hunger put aside for the sake of another. Lysander watched her. She had no idea who he was, no expectation of reward. Her act was pure, spontaneous compassion, a stark contrast to the calculating indifference he had witnessed from Cressida and Ignis. A warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in years, a glimmer of the hope he had almost abandoned. A few days later, Elara saw Arthur again, this time sheltering under a bus stop awning from a sudden downpour, the rain drumming a relentless rhythm on the metal roof. She had just finished her shift, her janitor's uniform damp, and Lysander noticed her worn shoes were soaked, clinging to her feet. Despite her own discomfort, her gaze fell upon him, and a familiar concern entered her eyes. She walked over to him, carrying a small, steaming cup from a nearby coffee cart. "It's just hot tea," she explained, offering it to him, her fingers still warm from holding the cup. "Helps with the chill." She sat on the bench beside him, a respectful distance, but close enough to offer comfort, to share the quiet space. She didn't ask personal questions, didn't pry into his circumstances, but rather spoke about the weather, about the small joys of her day, about a particularly stubborn stain she had finally removed. She treated him as a fellow human being deserving of conversation, of simple companionship. She even shared a small, hopeful anecdote about a new treatment her mother was receiving, her face alight with quiet optimism, a testament to her resilience. Lysander listened, truly listened, for the first time in what felt like years. He saw not a janitor, not an invisible person, but a woman of immense inner strength and boundless compassion, a living embodiment of the humanity he had feared was extinct within his own world. These simple acts of kindness, so profound in their unassuming nature, struck Lysander to his very core. He had encountered countless people during his disguise, had heard countless conversations, but only Elara had offered true, selfless human connection, untainted by judgment or expectation. The juxtaposition was undeniable, the cold, calculating ambition of his closest associates against the genuine, unprompted warmth of a young woman who had nothing to gain, who simply acted from the goodness of her heart. He had found his answer. The test was complete. And the results would shake Thorn Industries to its foundation, purifying it of the rot that had set in. He knew, with absolute certainty, what he had to do. The future of his legacy, his company, and perhaps even his renewed faith in humanity, rested on the monumental decision he was about to make. The grand boardroom, where the game had supposedly ended, was merely the first scene of a much larger reckoning. The atmosphere in the Thorn Industries auditorium was buzzing with anticipation. It was the annual legacy announcement, an event Lysander had traditionally used to unveil major philanthropic initiatives or groundbreaking research projects, moments of triumph and future casting. This year, however, the rumor mill had been churning with whispers of a significant leadership restructuring, a dramatic shift at the top. Ignis Thorn, radiating an almost unbearable arrogance, sat in the front row, occasionally glancing at his expensive watch, convinced this was his moment, his inevitable coronation. Cressida Vance, seated beside him, maintained her usual composed facade, her expression a careful blend of anticipation and cool professionalism, but a subtle tremor in her hands, hidden beneath the table, betrayed her own heightened expectations. She had spent weeks currying favor, meticulously planning her ascent to a more powerful, perhaps even CEO, position, believing Lysander was finally ready to step aside. The stage was set, the cameras were rolling, and the most influential figures in the tech world, along with a multitude of employees, were present, awaiting Lysander Thorne's address, poised for the next chapter of corporate dominance. Suddenly, a hush fell over the room as the grand entrance doors at the back of the auditorium swung open with a soft sigh of hydraulics. All eyes turned, drawn by the unexpected entry. A sleek, obsidian-black limousine, a model known for its exclusive luxury and impenetrable security, glided silently to a halt just inside the entrance. From its opulent interior emerged a figure who commanded immediate attention. It was Lysander Thorne, but not the reclusive, slightly disheveled man they had grown accustomed to seeing in recent months. This Lysander was sharp, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that seemed to radiate power, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his eyes blazing with an intensity that had been absent for too long, a formidable presence. He was accompanied by his most trusted, and notoriously formidable, legal team, their faces grim and unyielding, their presence a silent harbinger of serious intent. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, a wave of stunned realization. Cressida's perfectly composed expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then outright alarm. Her hand flew to her throat, a rare display of vulnerability. Ignis, who had been about to lean over and whisper a self-congratulatory remark to Cressida, froze, his jaw slack, his face draining of color. He knew that limousine, it was Lysander's private vehicle, rarely used for public events, reserved for matters of utmost confidentiality and gravity. A cold dread, foreign and unwelcome, began to seep into their carefully constructed worlds. Lysander strode purposefully down the aisle, his footsteps echoing softly in the hushed auditorium, his presence commanding the space, drawing every eye. He ascended the stage, taking his place at the podium, a single, powerful spotlight illuminating him, casting him as a figure of judgment. His gaze swept over the room, pausing for a significant, chilling moment on Cressida and Ignis, who now looked as if they had seen a ghost, their faces contorted in nascent horror. "Good morning, everyone," Lysander's voice boomed, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, filling every corner of the vast room. It was the voice of a man in complete control, a voice that carried the weight of absolute authority, of profound certainty. "Thank you for attending what promises to be a most illuminating session." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing the tension to build, the suspense to thicken to an almost unbearable degree. Cressida was now visibly pale, a cold dread seizing her, her carefully cultivated composure beginning to crack. Ignis, though still largely confused, felt a prickle of unease, a premonition of disaster. For the past several weeks, Lysander continued, his tone shifting, becoming more measured, more solemn, yet still carrying an undeniable edge. "I have embarked on a unique project. A social experiment, if you will. I have often pondered the true nature of humanity, particularly in a world increasingly defined by material gain and superficial connections. I questioned whether genuine kindness, unprompted compassion, still existed outside the realm of self-interest, whether my original ideals for this company had been completely lost." A few confused whispers broke out in the audience. What was he talking about? This was highly unusual for a legacy announcement, veering wildly off script. The journalists in the back began furiously typing on their laptops, sensing a story. Lysander's gaze intensified, fixing squarely on Cressida and Ignis, locking them in his unwavering stare. To answer these questions, to truly understand the moral fabric of this company and the people within it, I shed my identity. I adopted a disguise, one that rendered me invisible to most, a persona that allowed me to observe the world from a vantage point few of you would ever experience, a perspective stripped bare of all privilege and status. He took another dramatic pause, his eyes now conveying a profound sense of irony, of an unmasking that was far more than metaphorical. I became a homeless man. Frail. Disheveled. Needy. I was Arthur. A wave of stunned silence crashed over the auditorium, a collective intake of breath. Gasps echoed through the rows, whispers of disbelief, murmurs of impossible. Some executives shifted uncomfortably, a few glanced at each other, trying to process this unthinkable, utterly shocking revelation. Cressida's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a dawning horror, her face a ghastly white. Ignace's face went from pale to ashen, beads of sweat forming on his brow. The memories, the casual cruelties, the dismissive gestures, they were all rushing back, assaulting their minds with a terrifying clarity, a sickening replay of their own callousness. Yes, Lysander affirmed, his voice growing sharper, each word a hammer blow, hitting its mark with devastating precision. For weeks, I wandered these very streets, sat on benches outside this very building, even sought shelter in the alcoves near your entrances, enduring the cold and the hunger you so easily ignore. He pointed a finger, not accusingly, but with a chilling matter-of-factness, encompassing the entire room in his indictment. I heard your conversations. I observed your actions. And what I witnessed was both deeply disheartening and profoundly inspiring. He turned his full attention to Cressida, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Miss Vance, he began, his voice devoid of warmth, stripped of any pretense of collegiality, I remember a crisp autumn morning. You passed me by the main entrance, discussing how unproductive elements needed to be cut fat for the sake of the brand. You wrinkled your nose, as if my very existence was an affront to your sensibilities, a stain on your perfect day. Later, on a particularly cold afternoon, you instructed security to remove me from the loading dock area, stating that undesirables ruined the image of Thorn Industries. You even made a pointed show of wiping your hands with sanitizer afterwards, as if my mere presence was a contagion, a disease you might contract. Cressida visibly flinched, her eyes darting around the room, desperate for an escape, for a hole to swallow her. Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling, revealing the raw fear beneath. Then, Lysander's gaze shifted to Ignace, who was now slumping in his seat, trying to make himself small, to disappear into the plush fabric. And Ignace, Lysander continued, his tone laced with a profound disappointment, a deep sadness for a kinship irrevocably broken, my own nephew. You openly mocked the vagrants who sought shelter, lamenting their lack of ambition, conveniently forgetting that I, too, started with nothing, that resilience is often born of hardship. You tossed the dregs of your coffee near my feet, a casual act of disrespect that spoke volumes about your regard for anyone you deemed beneath you, anyone not within your gilded circle. You even suggested to a junior manager that I was too soft for caring about corporate social responsibility, when all that mattered was keeping these types away from our pristine image, prioritizing profit over people. Ignace closed his eyes, unable to meet his uncle's searing gaze, unable to bear the weight of the public humiliation. The weight of his entitlement, his casual cruelty, was now laid bare for the entire world to witness, his true character exposed. You both, Lysander declared, his voice rising, filling the auditorium with its absolute conviction, saw only a homeless man. A nuisance. An unproductive element. You saw someone to be dismissed, scorned, or simply ignored. You failed to see a human being. And more importantly, you failed to recognize the founder of this company, the man who built everything you now seek to exploit, the very source of your power and privilege. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the rapid clicks of cameras, the whir of video recorders, capturing every excruciating second. Cressida and Ignis sat frozen, their faces contorted in a mixture of shock, error, and profound humiliation. Their masks had not merely slipped, they had been brutally ripped away, revealing the ugly, callous truth beneath. The collective gaze of the audience, once filled with anticipation, was now heavy with judgment and stunned disbelief. Lysander then softened his tone, a faint, almost reverent smile touching his lips, a stark contrast to the severity that had just preceded it. But this experiment was not without its moments of profound hope. For in the midst of such indifference, such calculated cruelty, a single, radiant act of kindness shone through. A young woman, who works tirelessly to keep these halls clean, a woman who faces her own quiet struggles every day, saw me. She saw a fellow human being. Without a shred of expectation, without knowing who I was, she offered me a part of her own humble lunch. She offered me a warm cup of tea on a cold day. She offered me a moment of genuine human connection, treating me not as an unproductive element, but as a person deserving of dignity, of kindness. He paused, then gestured towards the side of the stage. "Ilara," he called out, his voice gentle but firm, carrying a warmth that had been absent until this moment. "Please come forward." From the wings, a young woman in a janitor's uniform, carrying her cleaning supplies, hesitantly stepped into the spotlight. It was Ilara, her face a mask of confusion and bewilderment. She had been quietly cleaning nearby, oblivious to the drama unfolding, until her name was called. She looked at Lysander, then at the stunned faces of the executives, then back at Lysander, her eyes wide with incomprehension, a small, worn rag clutched in her hand. She was about to apologize for being on stage, perhaps thinking she was in the way, when Lysander stepped forward, extending a hand to her, a gesture of profound respect. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lysander announced, his voice filled with a newfound warmth and conviction, "this is Ilara. And her actions, her pure heart, have shown me more about true leadership, about integrity, and about the enduring power of human kindness, than all the profit margins and market analyses combined. She represents the very best of what Thorn Industries should be." The weight of his revelation, the absolute shattering of their expectations, was complete. The room watched, mesmerized, as the unmasked CEO stood beside the humble janitor, and the future of Thorn Industries hung in the balance, poised for a transformation. The immediate aftermath of Lysander's revelation was a chaotic maelstrom, a sudden, violent upheaval that tore through the polished veneer of Thorn Industries. The carefully constructed worlds of Cressida Vance and Ignis Thorn imploded with stunning velocity, their empires of ego and entitlement crumbling into dust. As the auditorium erupted into a cacophony of whispers, gasps, and frantic phone calls, the press corps surging forward, Lysander, with a chilling calm that bespoke absolute resolve, pronounced their fates. Cressida Vance, Lysander's voice cut through the din, each word a precise, surgical strike, devoid of emotion, a cold execution of justice. "Your employment with Thorn Industries is terminated, effective immediately. Your contracts, your stock options, your entire severance package, all are hereby rescinded. The evidence of your callous disregard for human dignity, your ruthless pursuit of personal gain at the expense of our company's ethical foundation, and your open contempt for the very values I established, is overwhelming and, as I have demonstrated, personally witnessed. You will be escorted from the premises. Any attempt to access company data or resources will be met with immediate legal action and prosecution." Cressida, who had always prided herself on her composure, her ability to remain ice-cold under pressure, looked utterly shattered. Her face, usually a canvas of controlled ambition, was now a mask of horror, contorted in a mixture of disbelief and dawning terror. Denial warred with a crushing realization, a profound understanding of her utter ruin. "Lysander, you can't. This is absurd. I am an invaluable asset. My performance metrics, my contributions to the bottom line, they speak for themselves. Her voice, usually so commanding, dissolved into a desperate, pathetic whine, a raw, unadorned plea. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled, and she slumped back into her seat, trembling uncontrollably. Her entire identity, meticulously built on power and status, on her shrewd intellect and ruthless efficiency, was being stripped away, brick by painful brick. The irony was palpable, a bitter truth. The woman who had so readily discarded others as unproductive was now herself deemed obsolete, her worth reduced to nothing, her professional existence utterly erased. She was escorted out by two impassive security guards, her once proud shoulders slumped, her expensive suit now seeming to hang on her like a shroud, a symbol of her sudden, dramatic fall. Her furious, whispered threats of legal retaliation were met with the impassive stares of Lysander's security detail, their faces unreadable. Her fall was not merely professional, it was social, financial, and existential. Her carefully cultivated network, built solely on transactional relationships, would abandon her instantly, leaving her isolated and utterly alone. The whispers that followed her departure were not sympathetic, but rather a chilling testament to the ruthlessness she had sown, now reaping its bitter harvest. Then came Ignis Thorne's turn, his fate just as swift and merciless. And Ignis, Lysander's voice held a profound disappointment, tinged with a quiet finality, the severance of a familial bond. My nephew. Your tenure here is also concluded. You have shown nothing but disdain for the very people who work tirelessly to maintain this company, and an astonishing sense of entitlement that borders on delusion, a deep-seated belief in your own unearned superiority. The inheritance you so confidently anticipated will, of course, no longer be forthcoming. Your shares, your trust fund, your future prospects within the Thorne legacy, all have been irrevocably revoked. You will receive no further financial support from Thorne Industries or from me. Ignis sprang to his feet, his face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and incandescent rage, a petulant fury that belonged on a playground, not in a corporate auditorium. No. Uncle, you can't do this. I'm family. This is insane. You've gone mad. I'll sue. I'll expose you. You can't just take everything. This is my birthright. His words were a desperate, childish tantrum, utterly devoid of dignity, echoing with a hollow ring. He was a spoiled boy, finally facing the crushing consequences of a lifetime of unearned privilege and unchecked indulgence. He had never truly worked, never truly built anything, he had merely consumed, expecting the world to bend to his will. And now, the source of his consumption was gone. He ranted and raved, accusing Lysander of senility and cruelty, his voice hoarse with indignation, until two security guards, far less gentle than they had been with Cressida, firmly escorted him out, his protests echoing down the hall, a pathetic coda to his grand expectations, his self-delusion. He would learn, quickly and harshly, that his name alone held no power without the financial backing of the man he had so casually scorned. His lavish lifestyle, built on assumed inheritance, would crumble, leaving him with nothing but debt and a tarnished name, a pariah in the very circles he once commanded. While the antagonists were reeling from their catastrophic downfall, Elara stood on stage, utterly bewildered, a silent witness to the profound drama unfolding around her. She had witnessed the dramatic pronouncements, the furious exits, the media frenzy, but her mind struggled to reconcile the powerful CEO with the frail, homeless man she had shared a sandwich with, the man she had called Arthur. Her hands, still holding her cleaning rag, trembled slightly, overwhelmed by the enormity of the moment. Lysander turned to her, his gaze softening considerably, the harshness that had defined his recent pronouncements replaced by a profound warmth. He approached her, a warm, genuine smile now gracing his lips, his eyes radiating kindness. "Elara," he said, his voice gentle, infused with deep gratitude, "you have no idea the impact your simple acts of kindness had on me. You saw me when no one else did. You offered warmth and dignity when I was most vulnerable, when I was at my most invisible. You reminded me that the heart of humanity still beats true, even in a world that often seems to forget it." Elara stammered, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes welling up with tears. "Mr. Thorne, I don't understand. I just gave you some food. I thought you were Arthur." Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization, the pieces of the incredible puzzle slowly clicking into place. The truth was almost too monumental to grasp, too incredible to believe. "Indeed, I was Arthur," Lysander confirmed, his smile widening, a gentle, knowing look in his eyes. "And it was Arthur who truly saw your character, your innate goodness. Elara, I believe that true leadership is built on empathy, integrity, and a genuine concern for people. Qualities, I regret to say, that have been sorely lacking in the higher echelons of this company, qualities that you possess in abundance." He then made his pronouncement, a stark contrast to the severity of his previous ones, a moment of profound redemption. "Effective immediately, Elara, your position as a janitor is concluded. However," he paused, letting her momentary panic subside, a flicker of fear crossing her face, "I am offering you a new role, one of immense importance to the future of Thorn Industries. You will be the director of the newly formed Thorn Industries Philanthropic Foundation. Your compassion, your innate understanding of human need, your unwavering moral compass, will guide its initiatives. You will have a generous salary, a comprehensive benefits package, and all the resources you need to make a tangible difference in the world, to truly embody the original spirit of this company." Elara's jaw dropped. Her eyes welled up, and tears began to stream down her face, glistening in the bright stage lights. Not tears of sorrow, but of overwhelming shock, disbelief, and profound gratitude. "Mr. Thorne. I don't know what to say. I'm just a janitor. I don't have experience for such a role. I don't know about foundations or big budgets." Her humility was genuine, untouched by ambition or self-promotion. Lysander placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a gesture of comfort and unwavering trust. "You have more experience than anyone else in this room, Elara. You have the experience of a good heart, a compassionate spirit, and an understanding of true human need that no business degree can teach. And that, I assure you, is the most valuable qualification of all." He continued, his voice resonating with deep conviction, "Furthermore, the company will be providing you with a fully furnished home, mortgage-free, so you no longer have to worry about rent or your mother's medical bills. It is a small token of my immense gratitude, a recognition of the immeasurable gift you gave me." Elara could only nod, tears silently falling, her throat too constricted to speak. She was speechless, utterly overwhelmed by the sudden, monumental shift in her life. The quiet struggles, the long hours, the constant worry, the fear of not being able to provide for her mother, all of it seemed to dissolve in that moment, replaced by a boundless sense of hope and security. Her life, once a landscape of endless uphill battles, had suddenly, miraculously, transformed into one of boundless opportunity, a testament to the unforeseen power of a simple, selfless act. She had given a sandwich, and received an entire future. Her humble act of compassion, given freely and without expectation, had returned to her 1,000-fold, a testament to the universal law of kindness. Months passed, and the echoes of Lysander Thorne's dramatic revelation gradually settled into the new reality of Thorn Industries. The company, once teetering on the brink of moral decay, a soulless machine driven solely by profit, underwent a profound transformation. Lysander, no longer disillusioned, found a renewed sense of purpose, a vigor he hadn't felt in decades. He had not only purged the rot from his executive team but had also injected a vital dose of humanity back into the corporate culture. He personally oversaw the establishment of new ethical guidelines, prioritizing employee well-being, environmental sustainability, and genuine corporate social responsibility over relentless profit maximization. He had found his true legacy, not in the relentless pursuit of more wealth, but in the cultivation of a more compassionate and equitable enterprise, a beacon of what a corporation could be. He felt a peace he hadn't known in decades, a profound satisfaction that came from doing what was right, not what was expedient, from aligning his actions with his deepest values. Elara flourished in her new role as the director of the Thorn Industries Philanthropic Foundation. Her innate empathy, her first-hand understanding of hardship and quiet struggle, made her an extraordinary leader, one who inspired loyalty and genuine affection. She approached every project, every recipient, with the same quiet dignity and genuine care she had shown Arthur, her perspective grounded in real-world challenges. Under her guidance, the foundation launched initiatives that genuinely uplifted communities, providing accessible education, quality healthcare, and sustainable support to those in need, truly changing lives. She blossomed, her quiet grace now amplified by the immense resources at her disposal, her compassion making a tangible difference on a scale she could never have imagined. Her new home, a spacious and comfortable sanctuary, allowed her mother to receive the best care, alleviating years of worry, and Elara found a profound joy in being able to provide for her family without the crushing weight of financial strain. She often recalled the day she offered a sandwich to a seemingly homeless man, a simple act that had somehow reshaped her entire world, a ripple effect of kindness. Cressida Vance and Ignis Thorn, stripped of their power and wealth, faded into ignominy, their names becoming cautionary tales whispered in corporate circles. Cressida attempted to leverage her old contacts, but her reputation was irrevocably tarnished. No one wanted to associate with a woman who had been publicly humiliated for her coldness and greed by a man of Lysander Thorn's stature, her fall from grace too spectacular to ignore. She struggled to find meaningful employment, her ambition now a curse rather than a driving force, her skills too specialized for a world that no longer valued pure ruthlessness. Ignis, unable to sustain his lavish lifestyle, faced mounting debts and the open contempt of his former social circle, who quickly abandoned him once his financial backing evaporated. His arrogance had curdled into bitter resentment, and he often found himself in the very public spaces he once scorned, waiting for buses, seeking cheap meals, a stark reminder of his precipitous fall. He had truly become one of the unproductive elements he so despised, a victim of his own unchecked entitlement, his life a hollow echo of his former arrogance. Their lives, once so gilded and privileged, were now a testament to the destructive power of a heart devoid of empathy. Lysander occasionally saw them from a distance, Cressida waiting impatiently at a bus stop, her designer clothes now looking out of place, Ignis nervously checking his phone in a cheap cafe, his face haggard. He felt no triumph, only a quiet understanding of the immutable laws of cause and effect, the karmic balance of the universe. The story of Lysander Thorn, the CEO disguised as a homeless man, became a legend within Thorn Industries and beyond, inspiring countless articles and discussions. It served as a powerful, living reminder that true character is not defined by titles or wealth, but by the actions one takes when no one is watching, when there is nothing to gain. It is in the darkest moments, when the world seems indifferent, that true character shines brightest, revealing the enduring light within humanity. And compassion, given freely and without expectation, invariably finds its way back, often multiplied beyond imagination, proving that kindness, in its purest form, is indeed the most valuable currency in the human heart, capable of transforming lives and legacies. If this story touched your heart, imagine the other incredible tales we have waiting for you. We explore the depths of human nature, revealing hidden truths and inspiring acts of kindness. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. What did you think of Lysander's test? Do you believe genuine kindness is still abundant in our world, or is it a rare gem? And if you were in Alara's shoes, what would be the first thing you'd do with such an incredible opportunity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.